Hello, creative people. Welcome to Creative Conversations. My name is Hollis Citron, and we are so happy that you have chosen to spend this hour with us. So I am owner and founder of I Am Creative and Express Yourself Publishing, and I am on a mission to expand the definition of creativity beyond a pencil and a paintbrush and empower people, especially adults, to own their voice that come in so many different forms. So this space was created to talk with people with all different jobs, hobbies, and interests, and have conversations about experiences and perspectives, all centered around three questions. 1, how do you define creativity? 2, how do you incorporate it into your life? And 3, why do you think it's important? Then we have a free-flowing conversation, and we see where it goes. So I have had the opportunity to talk to musicians, Reiki masters, mediums, doctor, lawyer, real estate agents, and so many more. And these conversations explore the reality that creativity is not cute, it is necessary. People have defined creativity as their soul's essence, courage, imagination, basically all that we are and want to be. So sharing these stories expands one's thinking and opens up self-expression to feel more empowered, connected, and dare I say, happy. My inspiring guest for today is Kate Wyatt. At 5 years old, Kate knew she wanted to play violin after seeing a clip of a cellist on TV. From a young age, she felt the intensity and power of string instruments. Little did she know that this would be her life path. As a professional violinist and educator, she has taught hundreds of students of all ages in the southern New Jersey area. So Kate, welcome to the space.
Hi, good morning.
Hello, Kate.
How you doing?
Hi, good. How are you?
I am great. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I am so happy to talk to you. This is going to be so inspiring. So, Kate, if you could give us a little bit more of that's a very short clip of who you are. And I know there's a big story behind you, and we're going to find out more through the conversation. But if you could give us a little bit more about your journey, that would be great.
Sure. Basically, it all started when I was about, I'd say born. I didn't crawl as a baby. And one of the interesting things about that was I went from sitting to walking, and I started walking pretty early. Mm-hmm. And when I went into kindergarten, I wrote my alphabet upside down and backwards, and my parents came in because they had it all on display. And I remember they were like, oh dear, like, should we be concerned? And the teacher was like, oh no, she's just very creative and she just sees things differently, but she gets the concept, her letters were drawn correctly. It's just the angles were different and all sorts of things were unique about it. And my dad was actually an artist, so he embraced it from day one because they always knew I was like more of the artistic type of kid. But I guess once I was put in school, they could see I was set apart a bit. So as we continue, once I got into like first and second grade, they noticed I was falling behind a little bit with reading and I would get very stressed out, but I was excelling in any art class or anything physical. So I actually got some tests done in second grade just to see, was there a learning disability? They tested me for gifted and talented that same year because they said, she's so innovative and thinks really deeply and differently. So on this gifted and talented test, I had the highest creativity score they've ever seen.
Wow.
Yes. So it started from a pretty young age. And aside from, the academics and being in school, I actually started playing violin right when I entered kindergarten.
Okay.
Because I was about 4 or 5 years old and I was watching TV with my mom in the living room. And I remember, she was putting laundry away and folding clothes and I was playing across the room from her. And all of a sudden this commercial, or maybe it was a TV show, came on and there was this girl playing cello. And she was on stage. It was kind of dark, and she was a little emotional while she was playing. And I remember it caught my eye. And then I saw my mom's reaction. She got up, stopped what she was doing, walks over to the TV, and gets a tear in her eye. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is just so beautiful. And I remember watching her reaction and watching the TV, and I was like, oh my goodness, I want to do that. So I think that was really the moment where it all kind of began. You know, I was 4 or 5 years old, and then continuing on to school and high school and college. My life has just been filled with music and arts and creativity, innovation, all sorts of different things.
Wow. So I love how you explained, like with your mom. So it was really kind of an emotional experience because
yes,
you reacted to that, and then you saw your mother's reaction. So it was kind of like this perfect storm, per se.
Yeah, because to me, you know, I always perceived art and music as a way of life because I was born into it. And I think the thing with performing arts is the reaction sometimes is so visible and easy to see, where when we look at fine art or visual arts, we can have that same exact feeling. But sometimes, I don't know, there's just something about watching someone play an instrument that really stuck out to me. And I appreciate visual arts just as much. So I don't know if I should get into it now, but I do have synesthesia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is, I believe, how we met, actually. And the thing with that is the visual arts really have been paired with sound for me.
Yeah. So can you explain to people what synesthesia is?
Synesthesia.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically, there's a lot of different kinds, and some people have it where they might hear something and they'll see something in their mind, kind of like a mental image, and that's what I have. But I know there's other variations of it where maybe you'll hear something and you'll get a taste in your mouth. So it's pretty sensory, and the way it works is it's almost like two of your senses are kind of merged together.
Yes.
So for me, it's sound.
And you were saying that songs have colors and textures and shapes, right?
Yes. And for me, when I listen to music, I'll hear maybe the opening and I'll see in my mind what it looks like. So a lot of times I listen to a lot of like hip hop, pop, rock. I prefer certain genres because I like the colors and I like the sounds of the voices and the textures. So every song has, you know, many, many colors, but there's always that kind of base color. And I actually recently began drawing songs because for me, a lot of people are like, oh, that's so cool. You know, you're a musician. That must be so amazing when you play or listen to music. But little do they know, I actually had to retake a lot of my music classes in college because it was very distracting, very confusing. When you're in music college, you take a class called oral theory, and that's where they play music, and then you have to write down what they played. And I actually never took a class like that before college. So when I walked in for the first time, they're at the piano playing notes, and we have to write down the intervals, so how far apart the notes are from each other based on what we heard. And to me, I could hear that the notes were different than what I previously heard, like when we would do exercises. But then in my brain, I would say, well, it goes from a red note to an orange note. Mm-hmm. And then if they changed the key signature or something and then played it, I might hear the same note as before, but this time it's green because it's reacting to a blue note. So I was really confused because everyone could just be like, oh, it's, you know, a perfect fifth, where to me a perfect fifth is blue. But if it's played in a minor key or the key changes, it might change. So it sounds very confusing.
Right.
But yeah, and I swear that's partially why I didn't really tell anyone about it, because I thought it sounded so weird. And there was a professor I had a good rapport with because I had to retake classes with her a few times. And she goes, you know, what is your process? Like, what happens when you hear it? Because she wanted to get to the bottom of all this. So I told her, you know, when I hear notes or listen to music, there's all these textures and colors and shapes in my head. And it's very hard for me to put it into notation and really say what I'm hearing in the form of, oh, it's a perfect fifth, oh, it's a minor second or whatever. So She goes, oh, that's a thing. And I said, what? And she said, it's synesthesia. And this was maybe about 10 years ago. So I feel like it was kind of like a silly thing that I knew existed, but I didn't really understand it too much. So I was really lucky because she took time to explain it to me, and it took me twice as long to finish these classes. But at the same time, it also enhanced my life so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that she actually, and it goes to prove when you actually stop and listen to somebody and truly go with the intention of, look, I want to get to the bottom of this. And you're being a listener, then you find out what the issue is. It goes in every part of life. It's just like stop, ask, because you didn't know any differently. You've been this way all your life. So it's the way you saw it. How would you know that nobody else sees it that way or hears it that way?
Yeah, and that's another thing. And I think once she confirmed that that was most likely what was going on, I still didn't tell people for another 8 years, 6 years.
Why?
I think it's because it's something that it was my normal. And the minute I saw that it was making me have a hard time in class, or maybe I was different, it made me afraid to talk about it because it didn't seem like too many people could relate. And I thought, I just wasn't really sure what to make of it. And I guess it set me apart from other people in a way. And I guess I was hard on myself because music school, as we know, it's very stressful. People are very critical of you, and you're very, very hard on yourself at that point in your career because, you're in college for it. You're constantly trying to be better. And I think there was a time where it added a lot of stress for me because it was something that was my normal, but then it was later pointed out as something unique.
Yeah.
That held me back.
Okay, this is going to be a very rich conversation. So let's dive in. That was just the introductory, everybody. So we're going to start with our would you rather question, and then we'll dive into the first. Sure. So, Kate, your question is, would you rather be invisible or be able to fly?
I would rather be able to fly.
Any particular reason?
I think because being able to fly, you can go different places, you can see things from different angles, and it's an ability I don't have. And I don't mean to get all deep on you, but being invisible, I feel like sometimes we all have felt invisible.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was thinking as I read this. I was like, there are times, I'd want to be invisible. I'd want to be able to pop out and be able to pop back in when I wanted to. But
yeah, for sure.
yeah, the whole flying, I kind of lean that way too. And I like that aspect of the different angles, seeing the different perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. So, Kate, how do you define creativity?
So as I said in the intro, there have been so many different things that I've went through, with being a family of artists and really embracing a lot of my creativity. And to me, I've always thought about creativity being a different way to see things and being innovative. And really, it's thinking outside the box with no boundaries.
And what's interesting is, your teachers saw that from you from the very beginning. Your parents knew it right away. But then when you're put into a school setting, your teachers were like, yeah, she sees things in a different way. Did they, I'm just curious, in that kind of a space, did they hold that against you in a sense where they're like, oh, Kate sees things in a different way? You know how you say
yes.
The different intention on the word. She's different.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. Sometimes people, I've even had teachers refer to me as being unique. One of them called me weird once. And I think that really sticks with you sometimes because when I went to college and all that happened with, figuring out, oh, I have synesthesia. Oh, it's not so common. It actually can be stifling when you feel like it's a bad thing to be different or see things differently. I remember I wasn't too good at math, but I remember geometry was I loved it because it was so visual. So we did this assignment where we had to say how many triangles were in this figure, and it was kind of like one big triangle, and then they would like use lines to kind of cut it up. I'm sure you've seen something like that before. So I remember I found 2 more triangles and the teacher counted.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, actually. So, and he was like a new teacher, he was, I won't go into it. So I remember I told him, hey, actually, I think there's 2 more triangles, because if you look from here to here, it creates 2 more. And I showed him in front of the class, and then he recounted it a couple times, and he didn't say like, oh, wow, I can't believe you saw that. He just like hung. And it almost felt like I was correcting him when I wasn't. I was just more excited I saw it. And it seems to me that like sometimes people don't know how to take it because they're so used to reading, what's in the answer guide or this and that, where if you do spend time looking at it different, you might be able to go further. So for me, it's always kind of been like, I've actually been afraid to speak up sometimes because I'm afraid, the teacher will get frustrated with me or I'll be misunderstood, when in reality, it's like, I'm excited because I'm seeing something different.
That is such an important point to make. That is just so huge and gargantuan, because it's kind of like this, I see it as this, I don't know if it's right to say it this way, but an older mindset in a way where it's like, I'm the teacher, this is what we say, this is how we do it. Whereas looking at it as an interactive, collaborative space where you're presenting the information, you see that, you're excited about it, and they're like, wow, oh my gosh, you saw that. I totally missed that. You have amazing eyes to be able to see that, or something, where it's empowering and not like creating this stigma.
Exactly. And I think sometimes too, when you are excited and when you do see something that's maybe different and kind of away from that mindset, it almost makes people uncomfortable. And at the end of the day, it's like, I'm in your class. Don't you want to be able to say like, wow, I led this kid to like excel in this subject maybe they're not so great at or whatever. And I remember in biology, I was actually briefly a biology major before I switched over to music ed. But we were doing an assignment where we were studying the eyes and perception and different things. So I remember we looked through a microscope at this tiny image, and they were talking about how the brain wants to see faces. So basically, like, you might look at, I don't know, a stone, and you'll see like 2 dots and then maybe a line. We're going to perceive it as a face because that's very natural for us. So we were looking at this microscope and it was blurry, and they're like, oh, see how that could be a face? And I remember I spent a little extra time looking at it, and I said, hey, it's 2 faces. And everyone was like, what do you mean? And it was actually 2 faces kissing. That made it look like one blurry face. But the minute I said it's 2 faces kissing, you could see it clear as day. So it's interesting too, because I think if you do take a little extra time to look, that might be all you need sometimes.
Yeah. And how was that perceived when you said that?
So I was actually in college when this happened. And I remember the professor was like, what, really? And I guess it was a slide that maybe came with whatever equipment they bought. And she's like, wow, I am convinced that's 2 faces kissing. And I never heard that. And I think she's been there, for like a decade or 12 years, she said. And it's not like I know more than you. It was just literally like, hey, like, I see how this could look like a face, but don't you see how it could look like 2 faces? So I think too, when you continue education, sometimes when you get away from the earlier grades, you're embraced a little bit more.
Yeah. So tell us about, because you are a music teacher in middle school, teaching middle school. So tell us about that also.
Well, it's funny because when I was 13, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to come back home after going to college and make a difference locally. So blessingly, I'm back. And it feels like supernatural in a way, because it's exactly what I wanted. And it's like, it's a true gift. So middle school, I think it is such a tough age because you're really figuring out who you are. And it's just such a strange time because you're still a kid, but you're starting to see things as an adult. And socially, kids mature at such different rates at that age. So middle school, teaching it, I feel like every kid is so different from the next kid. And especially because I'm teaching music, it's so personal. And these kids, they come from all different backgrounds. They're interested in so many different things from each other. And I think I don't want to say struggles, but overall experiences as a kid and remembering how things were for me made me so much more accepting and opening and patient with these kids.
And they're so lucky to have you, because so many people are like, middle school, I don't want to deal with all those hormones. I don't want to deal with all that going on in one space. But instead, you're like, I totally understand. I went through this. I don't want another person to feel like the way I felt. And I want to be there to make their life that much better.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, too, because it is the arts, these kids are so creative with the learning process. And what you said before about kind of creating an environment where it's more of like a learning community and we're doing this together. I actually did my master's capstone project. It's kind of like, I guess, a thesis on collaborative learning and project-based learning and really different styles of teaching where you're kind of like a coach, where you're not really like an authoritative figure. You're kind of like a vessel that's really setting these kids up for success and giving them the opportunity to explore further into what you're teaching in really their own way. And you're almost like a guide more than like, here's what you do, here's how we're going to do it, the end.
Yeah.
So I think, too, teaching is such a creative career and social career, and you have to communicate well. So I think being a teacher really allows me to practice all of that every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, within the visual arts, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. There's something called TAB, Teaching for Artistic Behavior. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not.
Yeah, so it's basically what you're talking about. It's really creating a space where there's structure, but there's a lot of openness so the kids can explore. So various mediums are introduced and shown, and the kids can make choices as to where and what they want to explore. And there's writing that's done, like for them to say what they, there's kind of like pre-writing, and then like the exit tickets basically of, what you expect to be learning, what you actually learned, what you enjoyed about it, what you didn't enjoy about it, all this, but it's very experiential.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So within the music space, so I don't know, I just want to stay on this a little bit longer and then we'll move on. But because I love that you're really nurturing the space. Like, what does it look like give us like a little snapshot of what it looks like in your music room.
Sure. So I'm a traveling teacher, and my classrooms, they are on the smaller sides. One of them actually was an old box office ticket booth type of thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it actually has like a water, kind of like a pipe that's almost a foot big, and when it rains, you actually hear like the water come off the ceiling.
So it's nature sounds.
Oh yeah, like my students laugh. They're like, "Why do you have to teach in a closet?" But it's their space, and that's the thing. Like they always say when they come in my room, they could be crying, they could be having the best day in the world, they could be hungry, and they know I have snacks. Like my big goal is that during the day they have a spot that they can come to, even if it's just to say hi to me, and it feels like home. So I bought a carpet in there. I have posters, and they're not all just music posters. I have a lot of visual art because I think that's, always going to be a huge part of me. So it represents a lot of me. But then my students might do art projects or like a STEAM project, and I hang stuff they do up in the classroom. So when they come in, they're like, "Oh, Miss Wyatt has my work up." I have pictures from events we did over the last couple of years on the bulletin board when they walk in. So in some ways, it's like a general classroom, but it's really representative of who's in my classroom.
That's amazing. So it feels like this really safe space.
Oh, for sure. And, there's always people that say, oh, in real world, there aren't safe spaces. But to me, I think I'm a person who's a safe space. They know they can talk to me about anything. I'm always on their side. I'm always going to hear them out. And I think as a teacher, it's so different now than it was when I was even in school, where it's like there's so much emphasis on empathy and really connecting with your kids. And I think that's something that this last year with COVID-19 taught us is you can still learn so much just by being empathetic and respectful to each other, because everyone in that room comes in and they have something we can learn from. So this last year really was representative of everything, that my classroom represents.
Yeah, which, you learn more when you're actually respecting each other, instead of feeling like you were saying in the beginning, of not feeling you didn't want to speak, you didn't want to say anything because you didn't know how you were going to be judged. And here they know that no matter what they say, nobody's going to come at them.
Oh, exactly. And especially with any sort of art, performing art, visual arts, anything, I think it's very hard to express yourself and improve and excel and have that confidence when you feel like the environment is, I don't want to say elitist, but like competitive and negative, and you have to like constantly worry about what other people are thinking. And I felt that way a lot in college. So one thing that I really tried to not have was that. I wanted to have a warm, comforting, inviting environment where the kids know that we're a team and we're in this together. And if anything, they all go out to movies on weekends, or they hang out, or they FaceTime and practice. And a lot of them said they wouldn't have had as many friends if they didn't do orchestra.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God, they're so lucky to have you. I cannot say it enough.
Thank you.
Seriously. Aww. Because it's just, I remember my mom saying when she was younger, that here, she's 78, going to be 79, but music class had like 60 kids in it, 70 kids in it. And the teacher would call on you randomly. You would have to stand up and sing in front of everybody. And if you didn't, you were browbeat if you didn't do it. I'm like, oh my God, like I would throw up before
Me too. Oh my goodness.
That is so freaking stressful.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be that way. And I think that that's something that a lot of people in the past have, I don't want to say like they tried to make it that way, but it's just music was always seen as this like competitive, stressful thing. And it was in college, don't get me wrong. But I think nowadays, there's so much more emphasis on connecting with each other and just having that empathy. And it really makes all the difference. I don't want a single kid to come to my class and say, is she going to make me sing in front of everybody or play my instrument when I'm not expecting it or prepared to?
Yeah.
Because that's the worst.
It is. And it's just, it may be repetitive, but I think it's just when you create that space and you make people feel like they're important, and like you're saying, not a competitive space, you're going to get so much more from them, and they're going to grow, and they're going to be confident.
I think so too. And that's the thing, like support really is what these kids, everybody needs it. But I think as a teacher, these kids are representing everything you are putting into them and everything they do on their own. And if you can really set that up to be a warm, inviting, and supportive place, it's going to go so much farther than being hard on them.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to acknowledge the people that are here with us live. Thank you so much for being here. My question is, so how do you incorporate creativity into your own life?
Oh boy.
That's a big one.
So yes, I think a lot of it is teaching, for sure, is creative, and I have to improvise. I have to think in different ways to explain things constantly. But for me, I think it's just everything. I can look at a tree and think of, what shapes I see within the branches. And it's almost like something I can't control.
Yeah.
Because I really do think it's almost like a muscle. Like the more creative you are, the more you look at things and you see what they could be maybe in a different angle, or maybe what you can do with an object. I was recently in the Virgin Islands, and I was speaking to a woman I met who was born and raised there. And we were discussing a little bit about what we did, and we were just having a nice conversation. And she told me how she made jewelry, and she would try to sell it to people who were traveling. And, you know, they would see the piece of jewelry and see that final product, but they didn't understand, and they wanted to pay less for it, but they didn't understand how much work went into making it or getting the resources to make it. And I think when you're a creative person, you can kind of see the steps along the way of everything you look at. And you can really focus on smaller details and big pictures at the same time. And I think in a day-to-day basis, you know, you have such a rich view of everything around you, and what it can be and what it is and what it was. And I know I sound like very vague right now, but I think for me, it's something I never really thought about too much until recently. And obviously playing music, and like I said, teaching, that always takes the front seat. But even when I'm not doing those things, I can look at the rug on the floor and look at the shapes I see within the fibers. And it's just like really just your being.
Yeah. 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 Nothing small, just your being, just everything.
Literally everything.
But I think that's again, it's kind of going back to that concept of, you were presented with it, you grew up with it, you were accepted for that. It was nurtured.
Oh, for sure. And that's the thing. Like, at least, you know, when I was in school and I would feel like a teacher didn't really see me for who I am or what I am. And I could go home and know that, you know, my dad was an artist and he went through art school, and he always said, you know, you have to learn the rules, and then when you're older, you can break them. And that's something that always stuck with me, especially nowadays. It's like I'm really seeing that, you know, I had this great foundation and support from a young age, but as I get older, I'm doing all sorts of things. I remember my friend was asking me about my synesthesia, who does embroidery, and we'll collaborate and do some projects together where maybe I'll draw the shapes in a song and put it in kind of like a mandala form, and then she'll do her embroidery and make that exact pattern using the colors I'm saying that each section is. So it's really turning into something so much bigger.
Wow.
And it's almost like you're kind of constantly growing into yourself and evolving.
Love that. Constantly growing into yourself and evolving.
Yeah.
If you're open to that. I mean, there are so many people that keep themselves in a space, don't you find?
Mm-hmm.
Because
yes.
it's comfortable, even though they're not happy, they know it. And then they keep themselves, it's like this whole adulting thing. It happens with kids too, but looking at adults right now, it's like, well, I went to school for that, so I'm just going to keep doing it. It's making money. You know, we have a mortgage. Aren't you going to pay the mortgage or the rent? Or, you know, aren't you going to be logical about this? And, but in the meantime, not downplaying it, because yeah, you do need to do those things. Those are the foundation things that you do need to do. But if you're not giving yourself the attention to actually nurture yourself and do things that interest you and explore things that interest you, and then you're just dying.
Oh, exactly. And I think when you're an adult too, someone could have made you feel you weren't good, or made you feel like you only can be an artist if that's your career. And there's always that stereotype. I'm sure you've heard it too, you know, oh, you want to be a starving artist, where it's like,
right.
I have a good friend who told me, oh, you need a backup plan if you want to do music. They're cutting programs, da 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 da. And it's funny because it's not funny, but she is, I think she did science and education, and and it's sad, she's having a tough time finding work because there's so many science teachers, where she was actually going to go for art and be an art teacher, but she just didn't think she would be successful. But that's the thing. So many people don't pursue it, that by the time you finish a degree and you go to school for it, you're going to be in high demand because there aren't a lot of us. You know, I work 7 days a week doing my music, and it's, like I said earlier, it's a blessing, but at the same time, it was tough. And I did have a lot of people against me. And I really think at the end of the day, when you go home and you have people supporting you, it does help. But just because you're an adult it doesn't mean you can't pursue it or get into something new. I have students that are in their 60s and 70s that said, oh, I played as a kid in band and I just wanted to learn an instrument again. The pandemic definitely brought out a lot of creativity. And even so, if you work that desk job 9 to 5 and you're like, oh, I have no time, I think being creative and an artist, it's not always what you're doing, but it's how you're doing it. So one of my good friends is a contractor, and it's such a creative job. Yes. And I think the STEM education that's in the school nowadays, it's really embracing that innovation and creativity and giving the kids room to really be a lot more open and explore things in themselves to put out unique things into the world.
Yeah. And it's really needed in these times moving forward is creativity, innovation, collaboration, communication skills. Without having just this hierarchy of people where, somebody's setting the rules and you just do it. Everybody in moving forward in a successful space is just everything that we're talking about. It's more collaborative.
Oh, for sure. And I think that is something also that really, and again, I did my master's capstone on this, but the creativity and unity, like kind of what I'm trying to do in my classroom, you learn so much when you collaborate and bounce ideas off of other people. We had a tight network of music educators that were video chatting and talking and discussing ideas for this pandemic. And I just feel like from doing that, we were able to pull off so many great things with little experience. I mean, who knows how to teach music online? You know what I mean? Yeah. So when this all was happening, we all were constantly putting our heads together. We had group chats, and our students were getting such awesome, unique opportunities with our given circumstances. And I swear a lot of it was because we put our heads together and tried to go about this in a way that maybe we wouldn't have been able to think of on our own.
Which, again, it's that idea of that working together, you have each other's back, you're not in competition with each other, you're all on the same page that you want the best for the student, you want the best for each other because you're a community. And that's where, again, it's the safe space instead of the whole competition where I have the best ideas. I'm going to do this with my class, and don't even you dare, don't try it. Because I want the credit.
Yeah, and you get some of that. Yeah. You definitely get some of that. And sometimes, you might have a brilliant idea and then everyone's copying you and you're like, man, I never got credit where it's due. But then you see the kids enjoying it and you're like, okay, that's what it's all about.
Right. Yeah. I've seen that too.
Oh, yeah.
Incorporating it into your life, is there anything that else that you like to do? Like as far as, actually, I wanted to bring up, because you mentioned doing things, talking about the synesthesia with the kids and having them kind of create along. So if you could kind of talk about that.
Sure. And that's the thing, it's so great to have an opportunity to talk about it because some people might have it and not even know it's anything unique. So I appreciate you jumping back to that. So with my synesthesia, again, mine's influenced by sound. And then it's kind of like if I say, hey, imagine a pink elephant in your head, you're going to see that. Where for me, it's more abstract. So when I hear songs and when I hear even my phone ring, I could tell you what the ring looks like. Like my house phone, it's almost like a green lightning bolt when it rings. It's the weirdest thing. But I definitely use my synesthesia to teach. So one thing that I do is with my students, because playing a string instrument, there's no frets. I might put little like stickers on their instrument so they have a general idea where to put their finger. Yeah. But if their string's a little out, or maybe their finger's a different size, maybe it's a little smaller fingertip, they can still be out of tune. So a lot of tuning is a huge issue in the beginning. And I tell the kids, I go, look at the wall. What color is the wall? And they'll say, oh, it's like a peach color. And I'm like, right. So do you think we had to blend some colors to get that? And, they're young, but usually they'll say, yeah. And they understand the concept of blending colors because that's, you learn that at such a young age. So I started teaching them kind of in a visual way where I say, hey, think of like blending a color. So we're all trying to get this shade of, let's pick a color. And a lot of times they say blue. So I'll say, okay, this note, let's try to make it the same shade of blue. So if you're flat, it's going to maybe be like a darker blue. And if you're sharp, maybe it's a lighter blue, but I want this shade of blue. So here's my note. And I want you to really match and move your finger till you feel like our shades are exactly the same. It sounds weird. 9 times out of 10, they get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So things like that I'll do. When we play scales, I might show them a color scheme and say, these are the notes of the scale. So I might say, like, here's a bunch of different shades of orange. So sometimes we'll do that. It's just like a fun little thing, but for some reason they completely get it and it's very effective.
But yeah, it's this visual. It's not this abstract thing in your head. It's
Yep.
it's a visual, the visual and the sound element. That's really, really nice.
Yeah, and it's very strange because, sound and sight go hand in hand. And I really think, sound comes before sight, but at the end of the day, it's like a lot of these kids, they might be visual learners. So I always say I'll get the students who have great ears, but maybe visual comes second when they're learning, or I have very visual kids where maybe they want to see what they're playing before they play it. So it's a lot like a language in the way it's developed. And there's been times where I'm like, I might not have a visual resource. So I have to kind of put these ideas in their head. And for whatever reason, it just constantly works. And at first I thought I was going to sound nuts, but I was like, no, I see it this way. Let's see if they see it. And again, it's been so effective. It works. And I think it really pushes a lot of my more visual kids to feel, appreciated and understood, because it's very hard to learn something that's sound when it's visual's not always what we're looking for. So it's a good aid for sure.
Yeah. Have any kids come forward to you and been like, I see that, or anything?
Yeah.
Like that? Yeah.
So I do a lot of different like mini units throughout the year. We're constantly learning about different musicians and artists. Even, June was just Pride Month, and we talked a little bit about some LGBTQ plus musicians, Black History Month, Asian Culture Month, anything. I'll always try to include different groups of people and identities in my classroom because, again, I represent who's in my room. Mm-hmm. So for Black History Month, I was talking about this musical duo called Shargo, and they're two women from Brooklyn, and one of them actually has synesthesia, and it's very, very similar to mine, and she actually also draws her songs. And the crazy thing is I found out about her after I kind of came to terms with myself, so it was very, very amazing to come to terms with, there's someone just like me out there that also plays violin. So I was teaching my students about them and, who the girls are, their history, how, they're African American, but then they play European instruments and how they kind of blended the two. And they play with DJs, they do covers of songs, but then they also have the classical foundation. And we talked about just the historical backgrounds. And then we discussed synesthesia. And I said, the reason why I want to talk to her is because I also have this. And I think there were maybe 2 times I had another student come up and say, oh, that's so funny. Like my mom says she thinks I have it. So sometimes there's even parents that know about it. But I think to be a kid and have a teacher talk about it as if it was something, I don't want to say normal, I hate that word, but as if it was something that, was mainstream, like it was known about. It was probably really comforting for that kid to hear an adult say like, oh, here's someone who has it. Oh, you have it? That's awesome. I have it too. And I think it goes back to that empathy and kind of connecting with people. So I regret all the times that I thought it was weird. And when we were talking about adults who kind of I don't want to say hide from creativity, but don't think they're creative, you have to be gentle with yourself at a point and you have to accept yourself. And one thing about creating is you have to kind of let your walls down and just go for it. Because a lot of times, especially with my synesthesia, when I'm drawing songs, if I try too hard to make it all thought out and organized so other people understand it, I'm not really representing myself. You know what I mean? And my dad being an artist talked about that too. A lot of times when you're an artist, you cater to what people want. Maybe you're drawing a person. Maybe you're putting a picture of something on a piece of clothing. He was actually an airbrush artist. So I think a lot of times being an artist, we try to think of our audience, but it's equally as important to do it for you. And I think a lot of people forget that and they compare themselves to other artists, or they think that they have to be, they always say, oh, I'm not talented, where it's, but you're still you're still making something original in your own way. And I think that's something that more people should embrace.
Amen.
That went really deep.
Thank you for stating the whole reason for my company. For reinforcing, but seriously, it's always been the whole thing that everything builds on itself and happens for a reason and all of that is, I realized that 30 years ago, I was always saying, you don't have to draw or paint to be an artist. There's so many different ways to do things. In this context, we're working on portraits, but you know what? Let's break it down because everything starts with a line. So let's practice lines and just kind of breaking it down into the baby steps. And then they'd be so excited about what they did in the end because they saw that they did something. So I think it's so important of what you're saying about being gentle with yourself, because the whole comparison thing, it's just human nature. It's what people do. But not getting all caught up in all that and browbeating ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And being in music school, I wish I could go back and say, like, hey, this isn't who you are. Like, you are you. You're going to make a difference one day. And that's the thing, too. You know, we can't always see the end. I don't even want to say end result, but we can't always see where it's going to bring us. And I think having success in the art field, it's so much of it is just not stopping and kind of being your own advocate and always supporting yourself. And that can be really hard. Like you said, you know, comparing yourself is one of the worst things you can do because it really takes away from what you can do.
Yeah. So basically your words to your younger self would be, you're going to make a difference too.
Oh yeah, you're going to make a difference. And even my shortcomings, like having to redo the oral theory, it led me to be so patient. You know, I have one kid that she graduated 8th grade and she did not get into the advanced group. And I remember like working with her the first couple times. I was like, oh boy, she has a long way to go. And I never told her this. And if she somehow finds it, I promise it wasn't a mean thing. I was just like, oh man, like she's going to have to work. So she would eat lunch. But then as soon as she was done, she would come down, work with me. And after a couple weeks, I was like, wow, like I can really tell she's taking me seriously. Like we're working together constantly. And she was so timid. It was my first year working in this district, actually. And she was a little hard on herself. But after a while, you know, she kept practicing. And this year, she was actually my first chair, my concert master. And she's one of those kids that like you're not going to forget. And anytime another kid walks in and you think like, oh, man, you know, as a teacher, it can be easy to feel that way. Like, oh, I'm going to have to really work hard with this kid. But you know what? If you just don't think about it and really focus on the kid for who they are and what they can do. This kid was literally one of my best players this year. So it's amazing. And I think I give her a lot of props too for not getting discouraged and continuing. And I think when you're a kid, there's that side of you that's so innocent and unafraid to really just go for what's new and what's hard. And as an adult, you know, we've been doing that our whole lives. And it's easy to think, oh, well, you know, I could have done it when I was younger, but it's too late now, where that's not true at all. It's really about the time you put into things. And like you said, starting off with maybe just draw straight lines, maybe just practice the basics. And once you got that down, you can really add the next level.
Yeah.
And it's really a lifelong process, but still, you know, it doesn't mean you're not going to get better. It's just you're going to excel and evolve, like I said earlier.
Well, which is beautiful that it's a lifelong process, because we're here for however long we're here for, and we're always growing. So
yeah,
rather than being stagnant and just being stuck.
Yeah, and your life experiences, you know, you take all of that with you. And I think that also contributes to your creativity and art, because you've seen life in so many different ways. I tell a lot of people, after my dad passed, I had this really weird change where I was like, you know, life is short and I don't care what people think about me when I'm performing or doing my instrument, because I love it. It's me. And I understand that I'm still working hard to be the best I can. But it's like, I think sometimes too, when you go in through things in your personal life, you realize what's important and what's not. And, you know, if you spend your whole life thinking you're not good and you're holding yourself back, but maybe you're experiencing things in other aspects of your life, that can still contribute to your art.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely those big life transformation moments. I've seen people kind of go down the tunnel of sadness and victimhood. Victimhood is a strong word, but you know what I mean? Of just like, I can't do this because, but. Or empowerment, like you're saying, of, I don't care. Like, I have something to do and I'm here to do it and I'm doing it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, we spend so much time doubting ourselves when all you have to do is just let go of it and go for it. And I think, especially with kids, I try to instill that because I don't want them to grow up and be that adult that's like, oh yeah, I used to be pretty good at violin, because it is a lifelong thing. And just because it might not be your career doesn't mean you can't do it forever.
Yeah. So since we are at the top of the hour, we're with our third question, which obviously we've touched on all this stuff, but to wrap it up and put a nice little bow on it. So why do you think creativity is important?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think it's important because everybody's creative, and it's not about picking up a pen and drawing or picking up an instrument and playing or creating some invention to take over the world. You know, I think creativity, it can be used every day, constantly. And the more you exercise and the more you kind of unhinge yourself and really go for it, you know, you're going to see life in such a beautiful way. And you're not going to always see things for what it is, but you can see things for what they can be. And, you know, you can see yourself in a different way too. We're such interesting creatures, and we're always changing and evolving and growing. And I think if you kind of accept yourself for where you're at and who you are, and you just go for what you want to do, it doesn't matter if it's making sandwiches or being a chef. You know, being creative is not being afraid to do new things and not being afraid to express yourself. It could be a different way of dressing, you know, and that can change your whole mood and your whole day. You know, if you're wearing an outfit that maybe you wouldn't typically wear. I think creativity is just everything and everywhere. You know, there's always opportunities to be creative, every single thing you do. And that's the thing with being an artist. Like I said, it's not always what you're doing, but how you're doing it and how you're doing it in your way. So I think, you know, anyone listening or anyone thinking of that question, you know, you really just have to go for what you want to do in your way.
So yes, not being afraid to express yourself, because creativity is everything and everywhere. Perfectly said. So,
and we all have it.
We do. It's within everybody. And because I define creativity as your voice, as your expression. And it is within every aspect of everything, just like we've been talking about this whole time. And when you own it, and when you're willing to dive into it and play with it and make mistakes and grow, then you're golden.
Absolutely. And there's no such thing as a mistake when you're new to something or when you're giving yourself the freedom to just go for it. And that's the thing with being critical. Like, just don't even think that mistakes can exist. Go for it.
Yes, exactly. We call them beautiful oops, like this book.
Yep.
Yeah, the beautiful oops. So in the classroom, we'd be like, and if you make a beautiful oops, what do you do? And then there was all these options of things you could. We don't crumple up the paper and throw it away like that.
I love it.
So, Kate, can you please tell people how they can connect with you?
So I am on Instagram, and that's one of the things I use probably more so for my art. It is private, but if you want to follow me, it's fine. It's at NOTTSIGLA. And then Facebook, I'm just Kate Wyatt. Those are really the only two sources of social media I use. And of course, if anyone wants to reach out to me through you, they're more than welcome to.
Yeah. Wonderful.
If you're okay with it.
Of course. Well, Kate, I so appreciate you taking the time to be in this space. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's something I look forward to, and I'm
an inspiration. And your kids are, I've said it throughout, but I honestly mean it from the rooftops. Like, your kids are so lucky to have you, because they can grow as individuals and take this interesting time period and know that they had a teacher that was there to create this safe space for them and really have their best interest at heart.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So thank you. And listeners, this space is all about inspiring, connecting, and sharing stories. So please like, follow, and share so we can spread the goodness and spread these stories. And if you could please take the time on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen, to please review rate and like, so that gets that whole analytic thing going and we can just reach more people. So wishing you a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, wherever you are in this world, and be talking to you soon. So goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Feeling inspired? There are so many ways to do things for you, to get yourself moving, to get your creative juices flowing, and to have fun. Check out I Am Creative and Express Yourself Publishing. Go to iamcreativephilly.com, iamcreativephilly, PHILLY.com, and check out the experiential kits. Check out Creative Shui, which is all about creative inspiration and guidance. And for Express Yourself Publishing, there's so many multi-author book opportunities. So I would love to chat with you so much. Everybody's creative. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has an expression, and I can't wait to meet you. Thank you so much for taking this hour to listen to our stories and share the energy. And I wish you a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in this world. Bye, everybody.